In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Dear brothers and sisters, today we want to meditate upon the correct use of time on our work of sanctification. The Latin word tempus translates the Greek words, two Greek words, chronos and kairos. These Greek words express two different concepts. Firstly, measured, logical, sequential time, which is shown by our modern clocks. And secondly, time intended in a more general sense, as the realization of something, suitable, appropriate time, for the Greek, a time in between, God's time, a moment in an undetermined period of time in which something special takes place. Also in Christian terms, kairos indicates an appropriate time, the right time. In the New Testament, it means the time designated in the scope of God, the time during which God acts. But the right time for what? For the realization of the kingdom of Christ in us and through us. In the Eastern liturgy, at the beginning of the Divine Liturgy, the deacon exclaims, Kairos tu poiesai to curio. Translated in English, it is time, Cairo, for the Lord to act. It indicates that the moment of liturgy is an encounter with eternity. The holy sacrifice of the Mass puts us into contact with eternity, communicates the eternal to us. It lets us catch a glimpse of that eternity which we will enjoy eternally in paradise. Besides the Holy Mass, also the other forms of prayer give us a foretaste and reflect a ray of blessed eternity, like, for example, the adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, which we are doing now. God realizes His presence among us, and in this sense, prayer is the right time. The right time is, however, realized in time, in the sense of time indicated by the lances of the clock. If we want to realize the work of God in us, we must therefore dedicate our time to the Lord, and not only in an abstract sense. We have to spend our time concretely in union with God if we want to experience His beneficial presence in our earthly existence. On the contrary, a life which is not lived with this tension towards the eternal and towards eternity remains empty and without meaning. God cannot realize and does not realize anything in us. Without this tension, we can perhaps live happily, but never reach true happiness itself. We can make a career, but never reach true perfection. We can love, but never come to know love itself. The Italian poet Dante Alighieri writes in his famous Purgatory an expression, I say it in Italian, basse nel tempo e l'uomo non se ne avvede, meaning that time passes time goes, time flies, and man does not even realize this. In the sense that our daily occupations, as important and impelling as they may be, submerges our spiritual life, which becomes disorientated and directs itself towards the futile things in life as the object of its happiness. But since, as Saint Augustine writes in his Confessions, our heart is made by the Lord for the Lord, it will not find peace until it rests in Him. You have made my heart for yourself, O Lord. It is essential for a Catholic to make reference to those who went before him. I like to quote these words. Bernard of Chartres, who died around 1130, would say that we are like dwarves sitting on the shoulders of giants, so that we can see more than them and further than them, certainly not for the sharpness of our sight or the height of our bodies, but because we are lifted up and carried on high by the stature of the giants. The handing down of the faith takes place, in fact, through the voice of those who have gone before us, who gain value by the approval of the magisterium of the Church. A long time ago, I visited a place next to Oxford, where, of course, I learned not the fluent English which is spoken there, as you can tell, but I came to know that great figure of the convert, who was John Henry Newman, who wrote so much on the importance of knowledge of the tradition of the Church, especially of the fathers of the Church. Many have embraced the Catholic faith after having come into contact with the fathers of the Church and with the doctrine transmitted by their writings. If we take a look at the history of the Church, we realize that the saints were an eschatological sign, that is, a sign of future realities, the sign of the presence of God among us, a sign of the times, the sign of the times, a sign that God can live among us if we welcome Him. Among these figures, I like to call to mind those of the three little shepherds of Fatima, maybe because historically they are closer to us. In reality, almost 100 years have passed since the apparitions of Fatima. Perhaps because the figure of a child puts us to shame for the hardness of our hearts and the thousand obstacles we place in the way of God's grace. Perhaps, above all, because the day with Mary came to existence to spread the message of Our Lady of Fatima. The message of Fatima is so extended and profound that every time I have to preach the spiritual exercises there in Fatima, which lasts for 1 week, I always think that 2 conferences a day of about 1 hour will be enough. But then I realize that is not enough time, and that Our Lady's words could be the object of one's meditation for days and days. In any case, in one of these reflections, I reflected upon the consideration of time made by the 3 little shepherds before and after the apparitions. Before, they loved to play, to sing, play the flute, to dance, to pass the time with simple games like the game of the buttons. something that our young people would not know how to do, taken up as they are by social networks, by the unregulated use of means of communication, etc. But one day, during the summer, Sister Lucia recounts, we had to go home for siesta. One day, we were playing on the stone slabs of the well down at the bottom of the garden belonging to my parents, which we called the Arneiro. Suddenly we saw beside us the same figure, or rather angel, as it seemed to me. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Pray, pray very much. The most holy hearts of Jesus and Mary have designs of mercy on you. Offer prayers and sacrifices constantly to the Most High." "How are we to make sacrifices?" I asked. "Make of everything you can a sacrifice and offer it to God as an act of reparation for the sins by which He is offended, and in supplication for the conversion of sinners. You will thus draw down peace upon your country. Above all, accept and bear with submission the suffering which the Lord will send you." Those are the words of the angel. The little shepherds were playing when the angel almost tells them of, saying, "What are you doing?" To some, the angel's behavior could almost seem cruel, asking these simple children, almost with contempt, to stop playing, to ask them not to play other games but to pray, and to pray very much, to offer prayers and sacrifices constantly in reparation for the sins that offend the Lord. This, then, is how the little shepherds used their time. Their special encounter with the Lord and with the Blessed Virgin is our model. Sometimes we put other things in the first place, whilst we should pray and do penance. As the angel says, "Make of everything you can a sacrifice." Hours pass, days, months, and years go by, and our life does not change radically. Maybe it does not change at all. Maybe it gets worse. Where does the problem lie? The problem is in our heart. We remain still in our positions, in our habits, in our occupations, and we are not aware of that which does not go in and out of us, not even when means of communication place before us in a crude manner images of free violence like those that run in these days. What are our occupations? There is time for study, there is time for work, there is time for entertainment, but time for the Lord. Maybe we dedicate to Him that 1 hour a week on Sunday Mass. The angel asks, "What are you doing?" Pray, pray very much. Pray to make reparation for the sins that offend the Lord. Every sin offends the Lord, because it means choosing an inferior good, a good which is not directed towards the goal of our existence, which is the glory of God and the salvation of souls. Let us ask Our Lady to help us to live well the time we have to follow her teachings, which is in the end the same teaching of the Gospel, in which the Lord tells us to pray unceasingly and tirelessly. Praise be Jesus and Mary.